Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Marusia Butsurkiev, based in Toronto, and I'm with Ukraine Solidarity Information. We are a group of Ukrainian, Canadian socialists and allies actively countering disinformation and Russian propaganda in the left with webinars that we've been doing for, I guess, about 2 years now, that constitute extraordinary conversations with activists, scholars, and artists from Ukraine and around the world. Today, we're honored to have with us Oksana Brukhowetska, artist and activist from Kiev, Ukraine, Rita Adel, researcher and activist of Ukrainian and Palestinian descent, living in Jordan, and Frida Afari, Iranian American librarian, writer, and activist. We're going to talk about ways to build greater solidarity between progressive struggles around the world with the ascension of right-wing governments in Canada, US, Israel, and across Europe, though hopefully not Hungary as of tomorrow. It's so urgent that we think in terms of building a politics of coalition and solidarity rather than of competing oppressions. I want to thank my colleagues Christia and Mike for monitoring behind the scenes, and Marianne Abs for organizing and also for co-hosting the event. We're now going to ask our participants to introduce themselves in their own words, starting with Frida and then Rita and then Oksana.
Thank you, Marusia, and everyone who helped organize this panel, the Ukraine Solidarity Network of Canada, and hello to the panelists and their participants. I am an Iranian American librarian, writer, translator, author of Socialist Feminism: A New Approach. I was drawn to the Ukrainian struggle because it is a national liberation struggle against Russian imperialism that also has a democratic content and has feminist women as leaders and participants within it. Iran, as you know, has suffered greatly from Russian colonialism and Russian imperialism under Tsarism and under the Soviet Union and later under Putin. And from the moment I started communicating with Ukrainian progressives and independent socialists after Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, I felt that our struggles were intertwined. I've come to admire Ukrainian people for their ability to innovate ways of continuing their struggle and maintaining their humanity under extremely difficult conditions. And that includes Ukrainian independent socialists, who are some of the most clear-headed, forward-looking humanists and genuinely internationalist thinkers that I've met in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. And now Rita, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for organizing this webinar. And I think that the timing of webinar is very much important due to everything that we have been witnessing, not only in the past like 4 years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but also during those couple of weeks lately. So I'm Rita. I mainly work in research and analysis. I've been working with international NGOs, but I also have a degree in development studies and human rights. And it just so happens that I am both. I come from an interesting mixture of being both Palestinian, Jordanian, and a Ukrainian at the same time. I was born in Soviet Ukraine back at the time in '89. It was still the Soviet Union. So like even in my Jordanian passport, it's written for some reason that I was born in Russia, very interestingly. And then we moved to Jordan in 2003. And since the start of the war in Ukraine, I've been introduced to I've been introduced to so many people and so many organizations that are trying to bridge this gap between Palestine and between Ukraine, or between Ukraine and the broader Arab world. And it just happens that I do have connections with both of these struggles. So I'm very happy to be here and just share my perspective as someone who is in the intersection of these struggles. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita. And Oksana, if you could intro yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this event and talk on this important topic. I'm Oksana. I'm a visual artist, also curator and writer, and I live in Ukraine now. But I lived for 4 years in United States from 2020 to 2024. I was there in art program, in master art program at the University of Michigan, and before this, I stayed in New Orleans, and it was a time of Black Lives Matter protests, and me and my partner and like my family, we stayed all together. We were really drawn to these events, and it was the time that I started working on the book, on the kind of research, interviewing Americans about race, racism in United States, and about these protests, and because they kind of they were like continuation of the history of what was in American history like for centuries. So and then when the full-scale Russian war started in Ukraine, I was still in United States, and of course it was a huge shock for me because part of my family was still in Ukraine, and later I came back to Ukraine and focused more like on working like making art projects and thinking about art during wartime, also continuing working on feminist projects because it was like a huge part of my involvement in Ukrainian art scene, curating feminist exhibitions and publications and events, but still that unfinished research on Black Lives Matter. Later, I found the time to finish the book, and last year it was published in Ukraine. And there were many like different questions and struggles around this work, because like it was important to and I did it like I explained it in the introduction of the book, why it was still important to talk about struggle of other people, even we are struggling like the most, like because like being in Ukraine, like going through war every day, of course you like the most you feel like suffering of own people and of own country. But still it was important for me to publish this book and to have these conversations within my community and within Ukrainian and international community. And I will be happy to share more today. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. Okay, the way I'm already excited. It's so powerful to have women of such diverse and interesting and activist backgrounds here with us. Marianne and I are going to alternate asking questions that we've actually agreed upon earlier of the panelists, and then we'll open it up to our audience participants. So I'll start with the first question. It feels very urgent right now to stop the U.S. and Israel aggressive war of aggression, war of choice in the Middle East region. But talking about peace feels complicated, especially for Ukraine, which cannot just lay down its arms in the face of occupation. So I wonder if you could share your thoughts on how to build a principled and I guess realistic anti-war movement. Rita, do you want to start us off?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it is a really complicated issue because building a principled anti-war movement involves a number of elements. And I just want to go over a few of them because I'm part of the indivisible resistance network in the US against MAGA. And after the latest war, US and Israeli war on Iran or with Iran, we issued a short statement for the No Kings Day protests on March 28th, in which we try to articulate what are the main points in trying to create a principled anti-war movement. So I'll just go over a few of them. Number one, of course, you have to oppose the US and Israeli war with Iran, which hasn't ended. I mean, we've had a ceasefire, but it's very tenuous and we don't know if it will last. We have to oppose the brutal and authoritarian Iranian regime, which has massacred thousands of its own people this past January, and has killed many more since it came into power in 1979. We have to speak out about Iranian feminists and human rights activists who are being held in Iranian dungeons and executed as this war is continuing, and that the rate of arrests and executions in Iran have intensified after this latest war started. We have to oppose US funding for Israeli government's mass slaughter and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. The Palestinian struggle and the Iranian struggle are intertwined. We have to defend Palestinians and Jewish Israelis who believe in the peaceful coexistence of both peoples on the basis of equality in a secular democracy, whether one state or two states. We have to oppose the Trump administration's fascist alliance with Putin's Russia, support the Ukrainian struggle for self-determination against Russian invasion, defend Russian activists who oppose this war. And then in the US and everywhere, we need to defend immigrants and vulnerable communities under assault and detention, fight to preserve our civil rights, labor rights, freedom of speech, and freedom of press in the countries where we have them. Not all countries have those rights. And then in general, oppose all global and regional imperialist powers, and not only the US and Israel. I feel that within the anti-war protests, there's such a lack of knowledge about different struggles around the world. And there's just such a one-dimensional focus only on US and Israeli imperialism. So we need to read and learn about other struggles against authoritarianism and fascism in the world. So those are some of the points that my colleagues in the Los Angeles local chapter and Indivisible tried to issue in a statement that we distributed for No Kings Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Do either Rita or Oksana, do you want to jump in and respond to the question of how to build a principled anti-war movement?
I can add some of my reflections from perspective of being Ukrainian, because I witnessed among Western leftists and the American leftists in 2022 and later some like claims and statements for pacifism, for kind of this anti-war statements that were like that sounded like pretty kind of blind to the situation in Ukraine. So the idea was about not supporting U.S. government, not let U.S. government to support Ukraine with military because it's considered as an expansion of American imperialism and militarism, which is completely was kind of demonstrated denial towards like what is really was going on, and like denial of Russian imperialism and militarism. And I think this kind of stereotypes or kind of fixed ideas without really understanding the situation and thinking from the perspective of those who are like struggling, who who experience this invasion and oppression as Ukrainians are. So very often their kind of opinion, their voice was not heard. And in the situation of Ukraine, is if the West like would stop supporting Ukraine, it means that that Russia will win, and kind of Ukrainian people sacrifice like just for this kind of idea of peace, which becomes in this situation kind of abstraction, because I think you cannot sacrifice justice, because you should think about justice and about this who is really accountable in this war, and thinking about if you want to talk about peace, think how to restrict Russia, how to prevent Russia of doing what it's doing, and this is kind of I admit it, for many people were like difficult to grasp, because they really didn't know much about Ukraine and about like a history of Ukrainian and Russian relationships and the causes of this war. And so for me, I think it's important like to really understand the situations, because they are kind of sometimes very much more complicated than kind of these geopolitical ideas that already established. And to understand like the struggles, for example, also like if we would talk about Israeli and Palestinian war, which kind of this conflict like lasts for like more than half of century. But for example, in Ukraine, people don't know much about it, so they don't very often they don't understand the causes of this conflict, the roots of it, the traumas behind like both, how these traumas of both peoples like come together. So in this regard, I would say like this some educational background is also needed, like on the history, on the regions, to better understand their struggles, and yeah, and not just go into like some stereotypes or some propaganda things that are very like strongly influence people today.
Okay, thank you. Rita, did you want to jump in?
Yes, of course. I agree with both of the panelists, and I have very little to add, and agree to everything that they've said, and especially in terms of educating the public here and there. But for me, as someone who came to Jordan in 2023, I guess one of the biggest issues people here have been facing is the idea of, or the fact that there is this American and Israeli exceptionalism that lasted for centuries and that lasted for years and years. And so with today's wars, I don't think like the question is, of course, how to stop the war immediately. But I think we should go back to the root causes of war, and that is the injustice, and that is that powerful states can act in total disregard of the international law, and that there is like de facto no international law, and especially since people like Trump came into power, because well, there's a complete disregard of the international law, and we're just living now by the laws of the jungle. So I guess for me, it would be to build not a multipolar war where people were just states like Russia, or states like Israel, or states like America could act on their power, but to actually build the war where everybody would be able to abide by at least some sort of set of international laws. Again, it's very complicated to speak about international law because many view it as benefiting the colonialists and etc. And we would need to go deeper into what is international law, who does it benefit, how is it built, which countries were able to set what we call international law and international human rights organizations. We also there is also this risk of universalism, right, when you talk about international human rights law, what is international human rights law and what is internet, you fall into this gap or trap of sometimes not looking much into the local context. But this idea, I guess, for me is that we need to recognize the patterns of colonialism and patterns of imperialism rather than looking at states and what they do, because different states, they break international laws in different ways. So I think for me it's the most important to look at the root cause of injustices and just be able to recognize the same patterns when the states do so. So whether it's Russia, whether it is America, whether it is Israel, all of these states, when they wage wars, when they break international law, there is there is a pattern to that, and we need to be against the root cause, against the pattern of them doing that, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Over to you, Marianne.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for coming today. And just a note that we'll open the chat once the panel is finished for questions and comments. So the next question is just asking panelists to reflect on, and it's a question we talked about quite a bit, how can we overcome the fact that activists are often trapped in geopolitical and ideological frameworks, but we're really without firsthand knowledge of conditions on the ground or the real scale of people's suffering? And how do we learn to empathize with others rather than and avoid a competition of traumas? So I don't know who would like to jump in first.
If I can start from my case, maybe illustrating my question with my project about Black Lives Matter movement in United States. And I would say that I was prompted, was inspired to do this book and this publication. Not only that I was inspired by protests themselves that I witnessed, I went to with my family, but also because I saw in Ukrainian social media and in media pretty much a lot of racist responses and responses to this event that demonstrated total inability to comprehend what is going on, and total kind of absence of total kind of knowledge on this subject. So, and it was kind of for me interesting and important to bring this information from the first hand, so to talk to people. And this is responding to the question how we can build this solidarity understanding. And for me, it was a great experience, from just to talk to people to and through this conversation, through asking questions, through exchange, because every interview that we did, with my partner Zahar Popovich, we did this interview. It was COVID time, so we used Zoom and was searching for contacts to talk to Americans from different American city. And through these conversations, we also explained ourselves. So because we were just starting oh, we are Ukrainians and we are here. So, and we want to understand, we want to know. And this approach open help very much to for people to open up and just to share their lives, their stories, their personal stories, experiencing racism. Of course, sharing about politics, history, education, different kind of problems in society, but also explaining through own personal story and stories of their families. And we responded because the reactions were that sometimes we recognize that we have something in common. So because we Ukrainians also we struggled from this and that, and we had famine in Ukraine in 1933, that we had oppression of Ukrainian language. Then we had this in the 60s. We had kind of a movement of 60s, and one of my professors at art school, Black professor Mariana Porter, she immediately reacted, oh, we had civil rights movement in the 60s. So kind of building this recognitions and kind of following even these are very different struggles, and it's let's say Ukrainians are white and this is kind of black struggle. So from the like for many people it's kind of something totally separated, totally completely different. But when you start really talking to people and then finding something like similarities, something that resonate with you, and this helps to build friendship, build connections, and actually this understanding how these imperial powers like that they act, as Rita said, that they act differently, but actually they there are many similarities on how they operate, like whether this racism in United States or it's kind of Russian imperialism and Russian colonization. So yeah, it was this experience helped me to understand that for me at least the most important things it's like talking to people, but also educate yourself, because I have read like a lot of books and I was like it was necessary for me to learn about like American history from this perspective, like to be able to publish this book, and because it was a huge also like working on footnotes and so on. So yeah, this is how I see like these things.
Thanks so much, Oksana. I wonder if Rita or Rita, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Oksana. I do agree with a lot of things that you've said, starting from educating yourself, educating others, trying to learn from others' people experience. But it's also very human to see yourself not like, or at least to see your struggle as being centered in your life, because the Palestinian struggle is a struggle of more than 75, it's more than a 75-year-old struggle. And people here in the Arab world, and especially the Palestinian diaspora in the Arab world and abroad, we have been raised with this idea that that Israel is the cancer of the Middle East, the worst thing that ever happened, and etc. and etc. And then you grow up, and you think that this is one of the most important struggles, and it is, but it's also very difficult to see beyond that and to see that people might have similar struggles elsewhere, and the same goes for Ukraine. And it's also, I guess, it's very different when you are in an active war zone and you have bombs falling over your head, or if you're sitting somewhere in a comfortable place, in a safe place, in a safe environment in Italy. So you say, like, you tell someone from Gaza who has experienced a massive and was one of the most brutal of genocides in history, oh, you need to think of other struggles maybe or whatsoever, and people would be like, no, I'm barely surviving. So we need to also recognize that people are not always able to, there's not always space to see other struggles where you yourself are basically struggling for survival, like what happened in Lebanon 2 days ago, or was it yesterday? It's like in 10 minutes thousands were injured and more than 300 dead. So it's very difficult to say someone who is in that position, oh, you also need to show sympathy for Ukrainians. Or it's very difficult to see someone in Ukraine who has lost maybe a family member, oh, you need to sympathize with the Palestinians. It's also because it's very personal, and it's very like very, very difficult to sort of build that connection. Yeah, so
Can I shortly comment on what you
Sorry,
Rita?
Oksana, just maybe if we could go over to Frida and then we'll come back to you.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's fine if Oksana wants to say something about what Rita said. That's fine. I'll wait.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that this is what Rita you said. It's I hear like many times in Ukraine when people even in public events they said, oh, now during last years like Europe was so preoccupied like supporting Palestine, and they started forgetting about Ukraine because Ukraine is not so much in the news, so people feel kind of let's say jealousy. I don't know, it's kind of not good word here, but like that others others trauma of others is much more visible, and they admit that they like surviving and like they like suffering every day, and it's difficult to find a space like for to support others. But I believe still like in this situation is still kind of recognizing like the sufferings of others, like just saying a phrase, saying a word like, yeah, we are going through this, and so we see that these people are also going through this, so we can like do this, like maybe not a lot, but just to recognize, to say a word. I think it's important. Thank you.
Thanks, Oksana.
Thank you. I agree with both Rita and Oksana that we need to learn about the suffering of others and open space within ourselves to hear that. In general, I think we need to learn about the unique features of each struggle, its history, its progressive forces, its internal contradictions. And I understand not everyone has time for that, but the ones who are the activist leaders, they need to know this stuff. They need to know what are the strengths of a struggle, what are the weaknesses, and that requires both educational events and reading books and articles and hearing the voices of the people and activists on the ground. And if we don't do that, we will suffer. And I think one point that I would like to say about Iran is that the Iranian government supported the butcher regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, helped destroy, suppress the Syrian uprising from between 2011 and 2024. So when Turkey came in and basically supported some of the jihadist forces that had sort of moderated and put them in power. And of course, the Syrian people, had struggled for so many years that made it possible for the regime to finally collapse. But the Iranian people, for the most part, I'm sorry to say, were silent about what their government did to the Syrians. And they believed in the propaganda of the government that, the Sunni opposition, or they were only jihadists. Or if they talked about the Kurds, it was limited. And then when it came to the Ukrainian struggle after 2022, when Iran started sending drones and missiles to Russia to that Russia used to bomb infrastructure in Ukraine and kill innocent people in Ukraine. Again, most Iranians were silent. Most Iranian progressives even were silent about it. Some opposed it, like Nasrin Sotoudeh, the Iranian feminist human rights attorney, and some others. But for the most part, the progressives were silent. And so the Iranians suffered from that. They suffered from, not expressing solidarity with the Syrians and opposing the government's intervention in an active way. They suffered from not expressing solidarity with the Ukrainians. And so part of what's happening right now with this war, the US and Israeli war in Iran being so brutal, I think what the Iranians didn't do in not expressing solidarity with the struggles that I mentioned really made it much more difficult for them to fight against a US and Israeli imperialist war. So that's what I wanted to say, that if we don't do the kind of solidarity that's needed, our own struggles will suffer as a result.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we were just noticing for time. So our next question was going to be about supporting each other and building and beginning conversations. And I think we've talked a little bit about that. So we were just going to suggest for time that we just have one last question for the panel so that we can open it up for questions from the audience. So then the last question is, in whatever small way, what gives us hope, and what are some of the hopeful signs? And if we do see those, how do we make those visible? So who would like to start with that?
Okay, I can do. Um, I would
Nobody can see me. I'm just listening.
so I would respond on this question because this is a kind of very like important question, but it's a little bit, like for example, me like interviewing people on Black Lives Matter, we also ask the same question. So it's kind of question that comes to people's mind very often because I'm on like this horrible events and I'm on this recognizing like how awful like the world is. You want like to hear from people that someone still has hope. And I would respond in the way how Black journalist from Chicago, Steve Bynum, responded to me. He said, if you are doing something, if you are fighting against racism, and you know that you are doing something, this is like here there is a hope, not like that someone will do something for you or for us. So this is like the answer on this question to this question we should find in ourselves, like in our actions, in our deeds, what we are doing. And if you're doing something, then yes, that maybe like it will be hope. And here I can share like also about a book Voices of Black Lives Matter that was published in Ukraine, and I felt um, pretty complicated, like pretty uncertain if the book will, if people would be interested, because as Rita recently talked, like people are really preoccupied, like with surviving, with fighting Russia, with war, with things that going on in Ukraine. So, and in 2025, like Black Lives Matter was kind of 5 years ago, and it was in the United States. Like, is it relevant at all for Ukrainians? Like, and in Ukraine, we have also this kind of idea of something being irrelevant during war. We call it nenachasi, so it's not a good time for it. So I had these concerns that maybe kind of people would not react at all for this because it's not time for these topics. But actually the reaction was very remarkable because we had two very successful presentations in Kyiv and in Ivano-Frankivsk, and there were public interested in asking questions. And American like Black journalist Terrell Starr, who lives in Ukraine now and who supports Ukraine a lot, he participated. He's also like one of the people represented in the book. But then we had a problem in Lviv when presentation was cancelled because of the racist comments on the Facebook page of publishing house Choven, and because of threats of like far-right activists. So, and then it was a reaction from in social media from very important public figures like Ukrainians who kind of felt ashamed that this is still going on in Ukraine, that we cancel presentations because of like the racism is so strong, so we still going. So what a shame. Like, and they started discussing the situation and supporting book, and actually like the interest I saw in people, the interest in this topic, even it's about something different, like about different struggle, different events. And this is where I see hope, that when we have these public discussions, even conflicts, people like start thinking more, like paying attention, and in these discussions maybe we can build more clear, like we can better understand ourselves, like what Ukraine is, what Ukrainians are, how they still can behave in racist way, some of them, not all, and how we can oppose it. So it's good for our society to have this conversation. So I think like the struggles of others in this way help us to understand better ourselves, and maybe this is a hope for the better future for us.
So any thoughts from Rita and Frida? And we just wanted to suggest we go till quarter after the hour, if that's okay, just so we have a few minutes for questions. Frida or Rita, would you like to comment on this?
Rita, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Oksana. And I do agree that there is hope, but there are also a lot of challenges. Because the world has been so ruthless. At least, we all live in an actual world, but we also live in our own world. So for me, as someone who is Ukrainian and who is Palestinian, my own world has been collapsing for the past few years, because all that I see is war and trauma here and there. I guess that with everything terrible that has been happening, and the wars and the actions of and especially with Trump coming into power, it has become so ridiculous that most people do understand that the lives of normal people, the lives of civilians anywhere in the world, they just don't matter. They just nonsense to those in power. We are thinking of political interests. We are thinking of interests from selling the weapons, from the arms, and etc. There's this ruthless economy, there's capitalism, and people are just making profits out of wars. And this is a realization that most people realize now. And I guess this ruthlessness of the regimes, whether it is a Russian regime, whether it is an Israeli regime, whether it is an American regime, because it is so ruthless, people now can connect around, oh, like here, this is my personal life. And those regimes, they don't care how am I personally going to be impacted, how my family is going to be impacted. And this is something that I guess can connect with the people, because everybody is realizing now that we live basically in a jungle, the rule of a jungle. So this is one thing to like, as sad as it is, but because it is so ruthless, a lot of people see that our lives don't matter. And I do remember when the war in Ukraine first started, it was a big shock in Europe, but also it was a big shock for the Arab countries. And everybody thought, like, nobody thought it would be such a long war, because everybody thought, oh, because Ukrainians are white or whatsoever. They had this idea that Ukrainians are privileged, so the world will do something to end this war sooner, and it wouldn't be like those protracted conflicts and protracted wars. Like in other parts of the world, but that was not the case. And people are just realizing now that no matter your color, no matter your social stance, no matter a lot of things, you can still be impacted in the same way. So whether you are in Ukraine, whether you're in Lebanon, whether you're in Gaza, whether like even in Jordan, we for some time, for at least a few weeks, we were preparing for the war, and we're still preparing for the war because the negotiations and the ceasefire is very fragile, and the world is very fragile in general. So I guess that might be the connecting factor. If that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Rita, for those comments. And any comments you'd like to add, Frida?
Sure. I really appreciated what Oksana and Rita had to offer, and agree with what they said. To me, what gives me hope is that there are still people on the ground that are struggling. And in Ukraine, I see ordinary people fighting valiantly against Russian imperialist invasion. And most important of all, maintaining their humanity and their dignity. In Iran, there are feminist political prisoners who are against both the brutal regime and against US and Israeli invasion. They give me hope. Among Palestinians and among some Israeli Jews, I still see there are some who believe in peaceful coexistence based on equality, democracy, and secularism, although within the region, that there's just very little discussion of that. But there are still some who believe in that, and that gives me hope. And in the US, the protests against ICE, the immigration raids, against the detention and deportation of immigrants, and the fact that the opposition to MAGA has allowed some people to get to know each other who never would have come in touch with each other, who are now joining in the struggle against MAGA. That has given me hope.
Thank you. Thank you for that. it's so important that we remind ourselves of the resistance struggles that are not being covered by our consolidated corporate media. Watching people rising up in Hungary against Russia, saying, Russia out is another sign of hope. Seeing students in my province rising up against cuts to education, seeing the Palestinian student movement at my university across Canada, around the world, has been also a real vector of hope. And maybe people have other thoughts as we move to the chat and to you can also ask. You can raise your hand and ask a question live. So yeah, let's open it up to our audience now. I don't know which one of us is monitoring hands being raised. I'm having trouble seeing everyone.
I see that Sam has raised a hand.
Yeah, and I can't get video to work, so you'll just have to stare at my name. Many of us on this conversation are socialists as well as activists on causes around Ukraine, around Palestine, around Iran, and much else. And what gives me hope is the beginning of working class struggle for example, in the United States, because I think the root cause of the problems is capitalism and its crisis. And that gives us, it seems to me, a chance to build a movement that might be able to go after that root cause and end it. But that's a very abstract statement I'm making. And even though, I've spent 50 plus years in struggle and having problems, I've never faced what some of my friends in Ukraine and elsewhere have faced. So I'd love to know your reactions to that comment / question, whatever it is.
So the question is, and I'm going off your comment in the chat too, how do we make anti-capitalism part of our struggle? Is that your question?
How do we use anti-capitalism as a way to overthrow the system and help unite our struggles in spite of all our diversity?
Okay. Any thoughts from our panelists on that?
Or I wonder if we want to take a couple of questions.
Actually, do you mind if I say something about Sam's quickly?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. Just that, okay, as someone who's a socialist, socialist humanist, wrote a book on socialist feminism. What I like to say is that the most glaring way in which I see capitalism destroying us is capitalist alienation. So it's not just income inequality, it's also that capitalist mode of production itself is so alienating that it has actually helped turn part of the working class against itself. So when you see a big chunk of the working class voting for someone like Trump, who's totally anti-worker, and you see even people of color, among people of color in the US, there were especially men of color, voted for Trump. I think that is a glaring manifestation of the way in which capitalist alienation has affected our minds. Plus, of course, social media, disinformation, and the impact of big tech on our minds, and the confusion and the disorientation. So that is, I think, and now, of course, with artificial intelligence trying to take away our even potential for critical thinking, that is a great opportunity for us to jump into the conversation and not talk about capitalism in the ordinary way of income inequality. Talk about that, definitely, but talk about it as alienation, the capitalist mode of production, how it affects our minds, how it affects gender relations, how it facilitates gender-based violence, how it facilitates hatred against oppressed minorities. Talk about these issues so that it's clear to people that capitalism is the elephant in the room that so many people don't want to talk about, but that once we do talk about it in that way, we can actually help illuminate why big chunks of the global population are moving in the direction of fascism. Thank you.
Rita or Oksana, did you want to comment? And just to notice that I've got 4 people on the speakers list: Wanda, John Paul, Marussia, and Troel.
I have, thank you so much, Dr. Frida. I have nothing more to add, but just like a very brief comment of, first of all, following the money, and as long as people make profit out of war, and it's not just like specific locations, as long as we live in a system where people make profit out of war, out of misery, the wars are going to continue. So this militarism nexus with the war, we need to be very much aware of that. And at least in my surroundings, people are having a lot of existential crisis because of that, and people are just fed up to a point where they want to imagine a different world with a different world order, like not in an Orwellian sense, but in a world order that you can actually live in. And we're just people are so fed up they cannot even imagine a different world right now.
I can also add a few words about like the level of how manipulation of people's mind is going on using like very old kind of these old stereotypes, old ideas. They came back again, like as racism, as a sexism. We kind of see a revival of it, and just remembering, because the consolation of the presentation of my book on Black Lives Matter was at the time of when this case happened in United States, when Ukrainian immigrant woman Irina Zarutska was killed by black mentally sick man in the public transport, and how like white supremacists in United States used and manipulated this case, like trying to bring back this idea of kind of black man assaulting white woman, like calling her like so representing her as a white woman, which like also as Terrell Star commented on this a lot of times, like denying like her like Ukrainian identity and her story. But for Ukrainians, it was like kind of weird example, like, okay, how we can talk about like Black Lives Matter, black people, if you look at like black men like kill Ukrainian woman, and like the anger of some people was so strong, like so they would like deny like for example this all like American powers, like this all white like people in power who actually deny Ukraine, deny like they denied like to support Ukraine, like Trump making alliance with Putin. So all this is not so triggering as just this one criminal case, and this is because it's so easy to trigger this kind of stereotypes, this hatred toward like other people, like because they are kind of other, and these things I think like there are a lot of things like this in social media, also anti-feminist like agenda, which is kind of benefit those who are in power, and it helps them to divide people. So we need like to, I think, to understand, to try to analyze cases like this, and not to be trapped in emotions or like against like in stereotypes. There are stereotypes about other people in every society, like about someone being other, being like different, and like this xenophobia that race with this. In this, I think like the it's kind of part of capitalist system, like to define like someone who should be like oppressed or excluded.
So I just want to note, I think we've got 6 questions right now. So the next person is Wanda. Wanda, are you still here?
I think she's muted.
Would you like to unmute Wanda?
Maybe we should go to John Paul's question and then get back to Wanda when she's
Okay.
unmuted. John Paul?
Okay, we're on. I really have to say this is very, very interesting. A lot of things I learned, a lot of perspectives. I think this is a very strong webinar, and I thank everybody who's been involved. But I have a question to Oksana Bruchvetska. When you were talking about how Ukrainian history or Ukrainians suffered in the same kind of ways as Blacks in America, I think the things you chose were not very apt. Like, for instance, Ukrainian culture was suppressed under the Russians. That is something we share, let's say, with the indigenous population here, where in fact the culture was almost eliminated. But Black culture just grew. It developed all the time. On the sidelines for sure, but it had a dynamic growth. And in particular, I think if you look at what historians have written, including the Marxist historian Roman Rozolsky, who, by the way, supported the Black movements in America when he was there in the 50s and 60s, Ukrainian. When he looks at serfdom in Ukraine, he finds so many analogies to slavery. That's what we have in common. We were both our peoples were liberated in the middle of the 19th century. Both our people suffered there. So I would say we should be careful about we should think about what we share with other peoples in a different way. I don't know. That sounds like a criticism. It's not meant that. It's meant more as a kind of, well, I feel very strongly on serfdom. My family comes from the serfs. I've written about it, so maybe I'm a little bit sensitive on the question.
Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right, and I didn't, maybe it sounded a little bit like that I'm making like direct parallels, but I'm actually not, and I never would say myself like, oh, we have like so much similarities. These things that I mentioned, I actually heard from Black people. They were kind of making these parallels, and this was for me remarkable. Like Steve Bynum, journalist from Chicago, he told me like that stories about Holodomor reminded him like stories from times of slavery. So or like that Slavic melodies like reminded him like Negro spirituals. So this for me it was in this project I tried to be very careful because I also familiar what is mean kind of this idea of appropriation, like taking like telling about other people from your perspective is not kind of relevant. So I was just as a medium like asking people and letting them speak. But of course, while sharing like my Ukrainian background and Ukrainian history and talking about Ukraine, so sometimes there was some these parallels and also kind of serfdom in Ukraine and slavery in the United States is also was very different. It's kind of very different. We like can like just okay, it's ended in the same like historical period, but I think like slavery in US was much worse. Like it was like people were kind of dehumanized to such extent. And also this interesting case of friendship of Taras Shevchenko and Ira Ulrich. I also learned this from Black people. I didn't know. I'm like growing up in Ukraine. I never heard this history, this story about Taras Shevchenko. So yeah, I totally agree, and I'm always careful not to make like very direct like comparison. And I think like to see difference also is interesting, is no less interesting than see similarities, but see also and recognize the difference, recognize the different histories. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much,
Okay.
Oksana. Oh, go ahead, Marussia.
I was just going to read out Marussia Patrician's question. Could the speakers describe acts of solidarity with their struggle that they would like to see more of? So how have people shown solidarity with your struggle that you appreciate and would like to see expanded?
So if I can jump in. Growing up in Ukraine, it was, as Oksana said, not many people were very much aware of the Palestinian struggle, of the Palestinians in general. So it was kind of a little bit of a lonely experience. But then I came to know very wonderful people in Ukraine. I just came across this wonderful magazine that prints in both Ukrainian and English mostly, and it's called Spilne. And from there, I got to know many like-minded people, and it was very much new to me, and it was also very, very much important to me to see that, especially during the last few years, there have been movements of solidarity of Ukrainians and Palestinians. People went outside. They participated. They held banners. They shared the similarity between what Gaza was going through, and it was hunger at the time, and between Ukraine and Holodomor. And at least personally, it made me feel less alone. And I'm also aware of the people who also, when they see that kind of solidarity, they also do feel less alone. In Jordan, I do feel also lonely at times with my own struggle, because there is a strong lineage towards Russia for political reasons, mainly because it is seen, well, first of all, it is still by many seen as anti-imperialist movement, but also because there is a threat from Israel and the idea of the greater Israel and everything that America has been doing. So there is a direct threat, and in this political atmosphere, whoever is against our most vicious animal being Israeli settler colonialism, and Russia is seen on the other side of the history, as well as Iran. People are siding with Russia and Iran, of course. But for me, when people hear personal stories about the similarities between people struggling, so when I tell them, like, just like in Palestine, people are not able to go to occupied territories. I've just a few days ago, we had my uncle, who's also married to a Ukrainian. Her parents died in occupied Luhansk, and she wasn't able to go. And I was explaining to people here in Jordan how you cannot go into these territories, and how you would be forced into obtaining a Russian passport, and how settler colonialism works very similarly all around the globe. So when people, even if it's a small act, even if it's something personal, and people tell you, "Oh, I see you, and my parents or my grandparents, they have been through this," and etc. and etc., it makes a huge difference. And I just can say that a few weeks ago, a friend of mine. So as you know, there's this movement. It's called BDS, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, and it's very famous, and it's very popular across the global South, and especially in Jordan, since Israel began its I don't know what to call it, Holocaust of Palestinians actually in Gaza. So people are not buying Israeli products, people are not buying American products. And a few weeks ago, a friend of mine, she was like, "Oh, I saw a Russian product in the market, and because of everything that you told me about Ukraine, I did not buy it." So it felt like a very personal win. Like, at least for me. So I guess these conversations, because of the world we live in, politically, you don't side what is just anymore. You side with the most powerful entity that can protect your interests right at the moment. People are just being, or they think they're being realistic, and they side with politicians rather than the people. But conversations like these, I think they're very important to at least raise awareness and at least make a small difference, or at least, kind of change the narrative, maybe at least online or through social media.
Wonderful. Oh, Frida, were you wanting to say something?
Sure. I thought Oksana was going to speak first. I'll speak after Oksana.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I also because when the full scale war started in Ukraine, I was in the United States and just seeing blue and yellow flags on people's houses, like, or just people, Americans, like not only Ukrainian diaspora but other people, when they would come to the protest, it was very kind of inspiring and gave a lot of kind of great feelings, like but I also was just what came to my mind to mention that even inside Ukraine during the war, we have this, for example, gestures of solidarity with, for example, Crimean Tatar people who are like live now, those who stay, who remain in Crimea, they live under occupation, and some of them, they moved to Ukraine, and I had a great friends like in Crimea for many years, visiting them, and then later I stopped visiting. And in Ukraine, there are some art projects, some exhibitions about Crimea, the interest to Crimean Tatar artists, and so I think also in culture, in art, because I'm a visual artist, it's important when artists address like these other cultures and recognize their struggle. And for example, one young Ukrainian artist, she also made, she brought from somewhere, I don't know where she traveled, like the Palestinian soap, like, and she made a performance like helping like people, like she washed people's hands with this soap, like, and just trying to think about Palestine as well. So the different kind of gestures also, I think in art it's a lot of possibilities to reflect in more, not in so direct way as a like holding the flag or like making statement, but just to make something more kind of maybe personal, profound, like creating some image, some metaphor for, is also very interesting and also always like inspire me.
Thank you. I too have been really honored to see Ukrainians reach out to me, especially from Spilner, Commons Journal. Oksana Dudchak did a long interview with me, and then they translated the whole thing into Ukrainian, which must have taken them a long time. And I truly appreciate that. And then, of course, Russian colleagues from Postle, they did the same interview, translated into Russian. And I've appreciated support from U.S. feminists and European feminists who, have tried to amplify the voices of Iranian feminist political prisoners. And by the way, does everyone know that Nasrin Sotoudeh, the Iranian feminist human rights attorney who issued that powerful statement in defense of the Ukrainian struggle against Russian invasion, she is back in prison now, and no one even knows what prison she's in. They just arrested her and she's disappeared. So I appreciate the US and European feminists, and of course, Ukrainian, Russian feminists who expressed solidarity with her and other women political prisoners, and also Afghan women. There are some US and European feminists who are helping Afghan women, both in terms of publicity and in terms of material support. And that's really critically important for Afghan women who are starving and who are, don't even have any books to read under the Taliban, because the Taliban went to the libraries, took out everything that didn't have to do with religion and burned it. believe it or not. And as far as the Palestinian struggle is concerned, I've had some really good dialogues with some Palestinian feminists, and it's a pleasure to meet Rita, and I hope we can continue this dialogue, Rita, after the panel. With the Palestinian struggle, it's this complicated relationship between Palestinian and Iranian activists, because the Iranian progressive activists definitely support the Palestinian struggle, but are very opposed to Hamas. And then there are some among the Palestinian activists. There is that there isn't always a desire to separate the support for Palestinian people from support from Hamas. So that's where it's been difficult to have dialogues, because it's difficult to find people on both sides who are also have a strong position against Hamas and make a distinction between the just demands of the Palestinian struggle and the misogynist and religious fundamentalist policies and actions of Hamas. So we need to work on that.
Yes. Okay, I think we've decided to go on for maybe 10 or 15 more minutes, because we have so many and such great questions. And
I think Wanda is unmuted now.
Wanda, what is your question?
Hello, I have a comment and a question. My question will be for Asana, and she can think about it strategically. What did she learn that was the most important from the Black Lives Movement? And I'll give her a few seconds for this while I make a comment. One of the things that was brought out was that history and the erasure of history is done by capitalists, basically those in power, in order to have the media controlled, and that there's only a singular message that oftentimes is divisional. What was not said, and I think it's very important, that if you read books like Democracy Unchained, is that Russia studied the civil rights movement and slavery in the United States, that Hitler watched what was being done to the Native Americans in America. And one of the reasons that many people, in terms of African Americans, not all, but many, are always paying attention to anyone, anywhere in the world that has the same plight that African Americans. It was notable in Ukraine when many African students were not being allowed to go. We didn't know all the details in terms of Ukraine, but we understood the racism that was already showing its head. And I'm glad Asana's book is bringing out some of the people, not that, most of the Ukrainians that I have met have been wonderful, but even in the movement in terms of just the protests that I went to in Culver City, which is a very racist place, but there was a Ukrainian flag. And I smiled at the person, even though I had my 1984 shirt on, and I smiled. And the reaction of this person who had this beautiful Ukrainian flag was a negative kind of it. It wasn't words, it was just, he frowned because I was smiling at his Ukrainian flag. So I want people who were talking about, are there real parallels? We're aware that a Black woman was arrested who had been going to Russia for a long time, and that was a message to Black women in the United States by Russia to implicate and draw the divisions on racial lines within the United States. Now, I'll let Asana basically talk about strategy, because I think those of us who study different protest movements and human movements all over are not only aware of what is being happened, because Ukraine's off the board, Africa's off the board, and it is their minerals and the soil and all the things that are very important for those in power that are talking about Greenland, but they're still raping the continent of Africa. They're still practicing ICE most of the times, in terms of many of my friends will not go to a protest because ICE will selectively also go, not only of the renegade goods and all the people that are doing right, but the many of the things that are protests in Minneapolis are following groundbreaking things that were done in the 1960s civil rights movement. I'll let other people have the floor, but those in power studied the way to divide a country, and they divide it economically, racially, and otherwise. So be aware of that, because this predatory capitalism that is being formulated now is on the cutting edge, and that's why it's moving universally and globally, and those who are against it must also move in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. Oksana, do you want to briefly respond?
Thank you so much. So the question was like, if you can repeat briefly, like, was what I learned the most important from working on Black Lives Matter?
I think this is Wanda. I think your comment in terms of hope was very wonderful. I think that's very important for everyone around the world that is fighting against Nazism and authoritarian governments. I think we have to understand that
But Wanda, we're just trying to figure out what your question
No. The
is.
question is, and this is why it's important, the strategic thing that she thinks was the most important that she learned in the civil rights movement that is being copied all over the world as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I've learned a lot, and it's even difficult for me to distinguish one most important thing, because it was really like a huge educational journey for me. But I think what was like striking, that before going to United States, I knew zero, let's say, about what is structural racism, what is the history of United States. Of course, I've had some ideas. I knew like about African Americans, but I think like people in this post-Soviet countries, we don't like this term much now, but still they are still kind of influenced by Soviet propaganda. Like it was like my idea that why people reacted so kind of weird way, like in Ukraine on Black Lives Matter, because they, you know, like in Ukraine, there is a strong opposition like to everything Soviet. We had this dehumanization like process. And Soviet propaganda used to accuse United States in being racist, but Soviet Union not, of course. And we know like that this is not really true. So there were a lot of racism also in the Soviet Union, but it was not addressed publicly. It was not in the public discourse. So, and people who kind of don't know anything, they just thinking, oh, it's kind of Soviet propaganda, whatever. What kind of racism they have? Like they live like in rich country, everything is like fine here, America is so nice. So this kind of so it's still like for me was like important to realize like the real things, that how like United States was like structured, how it operates, like. And it was all new, because you live here, you don't know anything. It's just we have like this internet, we have so many information, but actually we don't have like real knowledge, which is very strange. And just being there, like seeing, and I think also important like for activists, like to sometimes to go to this country, to go to talk to these people, to be there, because what we see from what we read from the news, it's very often like misleading, and even like it's bring us to opposite, like to stereotypes. And so the most maybe important in this regard discovery was how is like everything is like how the truth is hidden, how like we don't know it. And just like when you see this during the protest, everything started like open up, and like for me, and of course like to just to talk to people and to connect to them and to learn about African American history and culture. It was so amazing. So I think it's changed me a lot. And yeah, and I can talk about this for a long time, but I think
okay, Banu has her hand up. Banu, are you there? There you are.
Yes, there was one person before me, but
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Well, go ahead, and then we'll get to the next person.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, I would just as an Iranian, I would like to draw the attention to all of these factors. To be honest with you, it's a very alienating feeling to be an Iranian right now in progressive spaces. And I also want to draw the attention of participants that no one can join from inside Iran on this panel because Iran has been off the internet from the beginning of 2026 for most days. It is still off. The voices, the authentic voices from inside Iran are not heard. So I would like to immediately respond to one person who said, what would other communities do, other groups do in solidarity with your people that you would demand? My demands are first, please pressure your governments for free internet for Iran, all the Iranian citizens, freedom of tens of thousands, by some accounts, even 100,000 political prisoners right now in known and unknown detention centers around Iran. And don't forget that they are being deprived of food, they're being deprived of being having contacts with their family members. And the situation that we are hearing from inside prisons is dire. It's like a humanitarian crisis. So please advocate for the freedom of political prisoners. Please put pressure on the Islamic Republic. And the third point that I would like to say, end of executions in Iran. They have ramped up the executions. They haven't stopped in the war, and they are now using war as an extra excuse to execute political prisoners with, again, first what they do, they torture them, they make them confess against themselves in televised, so-called interviews, and then they use those forced confessions as reasons that they are, I don't know, spies or whatever, and then they execute them without due process, without having access to lawyers. So these are really important. If we want to have a conversation between different solidarity movements, we need to hear the Iranians from inside Iran. And I hope you notice that this is absent. How can we bring actual, and those people who join, you see sometimes they go on CNN and other places, they have privileged access. They're close to the regime. They have privileged access to internet. So ordinary people, so today, even Narges Mohammadi, the Nobel Prize winner, who is still in jail, you cannot really right now even find them or hear their opinion. So, and I would like to say that I know I don't know how it will go, but I'm going to say it. The fact that we talk about capitalism doesn't cover the tyranny that Iranians and Afghans are struggling with. This is homegrown tyranny that existed before this capitalism even touched on our countries. We have to face the fact that the Taliban and the Islamic Republic, the Islamists that have used Islam as a political ideology to oppress any movement, any freedom movement for equality, for women's rights, for LGBTQ rights, for people of different religions or no religions. These have nothing to do with capitalism. These have existed. If you read the history of Iran, these have existed centuries before these modern have touched on our part of the world. And these are coming back in the of authentic culture. I hope you realize that. And this has people, they would say, I'm not going to really talk about what Iranians in Iran are suffering under the Islamic Republic, unless there is a war on Iran from outside. But I would like you to notice that what Islamic Republic has been waging against its people counts as war. on January 8th and 9th, just these 2 days, the most conservative estimate of the deaths on the streets of Iran by the Islamic Republic, they have gone to the streets and they have killed somewhere between 7,000, this is the most conservative estimate, all the way up to, let's say, 40,000. We've heard even worse numbers. A regime that kills protesters on the streets on 2 days, at least 7,000. This, I would think, that would count under circumstances as war against citizens. And how do we bring this struggle against homegrown tyranny as war and as an oppression that actually merits solidarity across the board and in international community is something we really need to reckon with. And I don't see really it being addressed. We are approached usually when the war, when Israeli and America started against Iran. I was approached, and I'm sure a lot of Iranians were approached by different media to talk about this. And I was thinking, hey, are you just approaching me? Where were you when on January 8th and 9th, 7,000 were killed? By the most conservative estimate, again, the same human rights activist news agency reported 7,000 deaths for January 8th and 9th massacre. This group says 3,000 deaths in this war. So the Islamic Republic's war against the people is far more damaging than the Israeli and American wars against the people. This war has ripple of perspective, of solidarity, and of sympathy among the world because their voice is cut. And I hope that we can find ways to address this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Banu, for your witnessing and your the courage of your work. I just want to point out that Banu has edited a collection on poetry called Women, Life, Freedom, and the link is in the chat. Frida, you have your hand raised to respond, and then I think we're going to have to wrap it up. So if you want to just make your comment.
Just that I truly appreciate what Banu said about, the plight of political prisoners, and that they are in dungeons right now, and that we do need to restart the internet connection. I have not been able to communicate with my loved ones for several months, and also that what the Islamic Republic has done to its people is a war, including the huge number that were killed in 2 days in January. But I do want to clarify the point about capitalism. So of course, religion and gender violence, religious prejudice and discrimination, gender violence, all of those precede capitalism. But what we are facing in Iran is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a state capitalist militarist entity that is exploiting and brutalizing the people, using all the facilities of capitalism to promote its oppression, and being supported by both Russia and China. And read the latest headlines about how Russia and China have been helping Iran in this war. So it's not only that Iran got stronger as a result of this war, gained control over the Strait of Hormuz, and blocked access, which it wasn't doing before. It's that it has the direct backing of China and Russia, which are also state capitalist, militarist entities. So this is a war that's very much within the context of capitalism. And to the extent that we have religious fundamentalism and misogyny, gender violence in Iran, it is facilitated by capitalism. Those were not created by capitalism, but capitalism builds on all of those. So we cannot talk about opposing them without opposing capitalism. That's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. It's been pointed out to me that Troel has been waiting patiently. Troel, can you briefly pose your comment or question, and then we'll ask for a brief response.
Yes, I can do that. I'm here from Denmark. I'm here for 3 reasons. I have 5 really good friends in my life. One is from Ukraine, one is from Iran, and I've always been really engaged with understanding solidarity. So what I experience, have been a politician for 11 years in Denmark. And what I constantly experience is the splitting of solidarity, that groups are played out against each other. And I think from, for example, Black Lives Matter, we can learn something about not only the strategic, but the tactical. How do we maintain the alliances so we don't end up splitting? And I experience it over and over. I've been an activist with the most poor people in Denmark, and I see them constantly being split over gender politics, over immigration, over all these kind of divisive issues. So how do we, on also a tactical level, maintain alliances? And here I think in a way I'm a bit with Banu in feeling that talking anti-capitalism often works against me as a politician, because a lot of common people don't really experience capitalism as something tangible that they understand as the opponent. So how do we maintain these alliances with real solidarity between people?
Do any of the panelists want to respond?
I mean, all I would say is what I stated earlier, that we are living and breathing capitalist alienation in this world. And if we deny it, we will lose. Because we're not going to have the philosophical, economic, political categories to define what is happening to humanity at this moment, with the combination of wars and artificial intelligence, gender violence, racism, capitalist pure exploitation, destroying the humanity and the world. If we don't talk about those categories, we will lose.
And thank you very much. Also, if I can add briefly, I think one of the most important questions of this panel was that we didn't have time to ask this question. How do we maintain solidarity and show solidarity with governments or state leaders that are problematic? In theory, all governments are problematic, and to a huge extent, all leaders, in a way or another, are problematic. And there's always this push towards maintaining a polished vision of a certain people for us in order to be able to stand in solidarity with them. And this vision, this polished vision, in reality, it doesn't exist. So there is racism almost everywhere. There are problems almost everywhere. And a few months ago, I've been reading this very much eye-opening book about Muhammad al-Kurd, and the book is called Perfect Victims. And as you can say from the title, the idea is that it is expected from the Palestinians to be exemplary in order for the world to stand in solidarity with them. And it is also, like, to a huge extent, I would say it's also expected from Ukrainians to be exemplary. Ukrainians, they must do this, they must do that. So in order for me to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, it must be a society that doesn't have racism. No, every society has racism, every society has underneath issues, and etc. and etc. So the idea for us to, or with Iran, we only stand with the Iranian people if they follow this and that, and it's just like it's never the case, because all societies have internal problems with them, all governments have internal problems with them. So I guess we do need to understand that it is, first of all, our flawed in human nature, and then we need to stand in solidarity with the people, with the regimes. Not with the regimes. For me, it has been very difficult to be both Ukrainian and Palestinian for the past few years. I've had friends saying, there's this Yemeni, the Yemenis are sending their people to fight in Ukraine, and then there are different ways that the governments are participating in the war, if not directly, then indirectly. And I've had a friend who was saying, oh, I cannot stand in solidarity with Iran. They've been sending Shahid drones to Ukraine. And then someone else would be saying, I cannot stand in solidarity with Ukraine, who's partnering with the US, and they've been using US weapons to kill children in Gaza. So if you're going to look into that, and if you're going to look for the perfect people so that we would be in solidarity with them, that's not going to happen. There is no black and white, especially now, and there are more colors than just that, and we need to see the nuances and the complexities of each case individually. But just again, we need to be able to see injustice in different that is manifested in different ways all around the world, if I can add that.
Thank you, Rita. And those are really important words to end with. Thank you to our panelists for reminding us to hear one another's stories, to look at the root causes of war, to identify both our similarities and our differences, and to be upfront and honest about that. This webinar has been recorded and will be available on our website and on Facebook and other social media. We have a webinar coming up very soon, and Mike is going to briefly tell you about that before we go.
Yes, thank you all so much, particularly to our panelists for this amazing webinar. Thank you for the excellent questions. Thank you for everyone who's taken the time on a Saturday to participate. Very quickly, the next webinar that Ukraine Solidarity Information is organizing is on the situation of the LGBT community in Ukraine. We're lining up some scholars who've worked on the attempts to set up same-sex partner laws. There's actually a controversial process draft law in place. The Ukrainian Supreme Court has just confirmed, as with other decisions, as far as I understand, counting a same-sex couple as a family. So things are moving, obviously very challenging, like everyone has mentioned. In times of war, it's challenging to do many things, let alone make social progress. So stay tuned, and please join our mailing list if you're interested, and we'll give you the updates as the final details as they are determined. Thanks.
Okay, Dyakuyu vam. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rita, Oksana, and Frida. That was a really profound an important conversation, and who knows, maybe we need to do a part 2. Marianne, did you need to say anything, or?
No, just this video will be available on our website and YouTube channel, and thanks to everyone who came and participated and spent this time with us.
Thank you all.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.